es sapratu, ka visi ir pamodušies vai pārtraukuši sarunas pēc šī spēcīgā mana uzsitiena, un mēs varam turpināt mūsu semināru konferenci. Jums zināšanai nākošie kārtie runātāji samainījās vietām. Viņi nolēma, ka viņiem būtu ērtāk un mums loģiskāk saprast, ja viņi uzstātos otrādi. Ja jūs neiebilstat un neuzstājiet uz to, ka mums vajag atgriezties pie vecās kārtības, redzu, ka visi piekrīt, tad es dodu vārdu manam vecam paziņam un sadarbības biedram daudzos jautājumos Paidera kungam. Lūdzu.
Labdien! Labdien, dāmas un kungi! Es ceru, ka prezentācija latviski, ja kāds grib sekot līdz, tad viņš vai viņa var sekot latviešu valodā, tāpēc es tad mēģināšu pāriet uz angļu valodu un tātad nedaudz izskaidrošu. Tātad to, kas par šo tēmu runāšu tad angliski. First of all, I'd like to introduce with myself. My name is Juris and I am Doctor of Geography. I'm now working as assistant professor in Latvian University, Department of the Geography and Earth Science, and my subject is economic geography, transport geography, and Latvian energy. But today's presentation is focusing on a question about the Latvian crisis, and my part is mainly on some causes and some basis why a crisis happened and why it was so deep. In this picture you see it's 9 of July this year when decision about the Latvian participation of Eurozone was done. And this is Latvian Prime Minister, and my colleague, geographer Andris Vilks, we studied together in one group, and now he's Minister of the Finance. But first of all, I'd just like to show you how was Latvian GDP changing from 80s till 2010. And this graph shows some of the GDP on the prices of 2000. And as you see, the 90s was not the happiest time in Latvian history. It was seriously deep crisis. If you compare GDP 1990 with 1993, it was minus 40%. The crisis happened between 1990 and 1993. It was awful. It was actually something like Big Depression, but only in one small country. This is not a unique picture. If you see same picture for Lithuania, for Kazakhstan, for Russia, it's a very similar picture. It was an extremely serious decrease of the wealth of the nations. It was decrease of the incomes, and actually in 2010 we again reach a level of the 1990. In this time, Latvia didn't become much richer on the terms of the services and goods what we can buy for some additional salary. If you talk about what was objective factors of the crisis, and actually the basis why some consequences was happened is Latvia became member of European Union, and in that time we are open as capital market. We open capital market, and the large amount of the we will see in some pictures after this. Amount of the money from the outside moving to the Latvia, And in that time, it's one of the cause. Second cause was there was hope that Latvia very quickly will reach some European level of the income and of the wealth. It was some hope for our nations, and actually this hope have some projections about the personal income. These projections was this personal income will just grow from year to year, and actually based on that the people have not objective about the risk. They decide to get a credit about the personal finance. In this case, when this money from the outside finance money come to Latvia, this money moving to the fields where it was mostly profitable, and most profitable industries was maximum profit. It was real estate. And actually, in this time, real estate became most growing industry, and especially the building industry, and etc. In that time, resource what Latvia didn't have enough was a people, and this reflect very fast salaries growing, and these salaries growing in that time. Make illusion we are very quickly will reach European level. We will became very rich in some couple of years, and finally this lack of the people. There was some examples of the unrealistic salary payment, especially in the building industry, when some car driver get some $300 per day or on the hand for 8 hours work. This graph shows the profit on the different branches, and in that time when this capital is moving in the Latvia, actually all most profitable was real estate, building, and all things concerning the trade. This was the branches where it was growing in this boom time. And this graph shows what I'm talking. The residence money and money which is come from the foreign countries. It's basically from the banks in Scandinavia. And there you see the big gap. This gap will start growing in 2004, when this stream of the foreign money come in Latvia. And of course, it's seriously transfer wealth of the different of the companies. In the red color, this is a deposits of the companies, reserves of the companies, and blue color is the credits of the companies. You see, these wealth, which was more or less balanced in 2004, become absolutely unbalanced in 2008. This same, a bit more realistic, but same picture is on a private, on the households. In 2004, households have higher reserves, higher deposits level than the credit. It's in all country, and since this the money come in Latvia, the volume of the all credits for the households became much larger than reserves and deposits. But actually, these Latvian people are more realistic. They are more pragmatic concerning the Latvian companies. Where it's thin line, but actually where this money, these foreign banks' money, in what direction this money was moving, and you see this the yellow line, which is the lowest one. This is consumer credits. It's for some cars or etc. It's not big, not very important. Industrial credits didn't benefit from this line. Much better was commercial credits, which is for a trade. And the green light line is credits for a real estate. All these money, which comes when Latvia opened the borders for a banking sector in the European Union, all these money comes to the real estate sector. When we come to the cause of the Latvian crisis was the mass of the credit was non-balanced with the Latvian economy possibilities, and this was the main cause of the why such crisis was happened. And actually, if you come to this is a Latvian translation of the Paul Krugman book, and I'm economic geographer, and Paul Krugman is economic geographer too. He have a Nobel Prize about the book, and the book name is New Economic Geography. And this is just quoting of the Paul Krugman. I translate from Latvian, but the cause of the crisis is because market was too open for a capital movement. This is one of the Krugman's decision. Now the Latvian main economists, like Uldis Osis, have same conclusions about the causes of the crisis. This is the free capital movement was main causes why these things happen. And actually, then we can come to the not the causes of the problem, but some fact or some something which happened when a crisis became like in a public, and of course this how it's happened, some fact which was happened when crisis is started, and now crisis is started. And this, it's not a cause, but it's just a fact which was happened in 2008. This is bankruptcy of the, real bankruptcy of the Parex Banka, one of the quite large bank in that time. This Latvian government decision to pay all debts of this bank, and this was larger than Latvian possibilities. And to pay all these debts of this bank, to bail out it, it means Latvia became faced on the bankruptcy. But this is not cause of the problem. This is just official explanation why it's happened. Why the Parex Bank? There was why such things happened with the Parex Bank. There was three causes why Latvia solved Parex Banka problem in such manner. The first cause was these banks really have a very big finance problem. That's fact. And there was a different estimation. One of the owner of the Parex Banka say it's 200 million lats in some secret documents of the government meetings. There was a mention 700 million lats. Actually, we should discuss about the sum, but actually there was a serious finance problem. We don't discuss why it's happened, but there was a serious finance problem. Another thing was political influence of these bank owners. To put this bank on the bankruptcy was very good idea to stop political influence of the bank owners. And then I think this is a Latvian tradition. When a bank is bankruptcy, there was a lot of possibilities to generate extra money on this case, on this third possibility why it's happened in such manner. I just give you one example of the political influence of this bank. It's 2008. It's the biggest newspaper in Russian language. 7th November of 2008. The main article is trust of the Parex Bank is growing with a photo of the president of Latvia and of the owner of the bank, and in the 10th of November the bank is bankruptcy. It's just this illustration just show how large they have a political influence to the society in that time. And of course, there was a lot of things which are very dirty in the bank, concerning the concerning the when state money was used to bail out this bank. There was, I think, so many, but there was no any research or any official charges from the state about this. And actually, this, if you ask for society, why happened crisis? What was cause of the crisis? The answer should be that this is a Parex bank bankruptcy. And this is a default of the Latvian state because Parex bank bankruptcy. But this is not the right cause. Right cause is free capital movement, and that we couldn't control that movement. When crisis was started, of course, there was some expectation what the businesses and the political elite should get from the crisis. The first idea was to finalize state company privatization, and actually these things is done. Last 4 years, government is pumping out profit from the all Latvian state companies more than these companies can pay. Now companies keep the credits from the banks to pay dividends for the Latvian state. And this is things what's happened with LMT, Latvian mobile telephone operator, and these things has happened with Latvian Ergo, which is a main electricity company in Latvia. And actually, such policy is a way how these state in fact privatized these companies. Another thing was, but big hope from the business society from the crisis was what they told that time, introduce trade market. And they have an expectation then labor market. They have expectation there will be very big unemployment, and people will start war to each other to get free places in a different jobs, and but it wasn't happened because we have very nice airport, Riga airport. We have a lot of flights to the Ireland, to the Norway, to the Germany. It wasn't happened. These labor market didn't establish. Yeah, there was some discussions, but of course not in official level, but in between economists and in the press about how to solve the crisis. And the one idea was to devaluate Latvian currency. We have a very good historical experience in 1936 when Latvian national currency was devalued for 40%. And in that time, we double in 1 year, we double as export after that. If you look into the other countries, how they solve the problem, then especially in the blue color, you see the countries that didn't devaluate. Light red countries which devaluate between 8 and 20%, and more than 20% is red color. It means devaluation was a logical decision for a lot of countries. Why Latvia didn't do that? This Paul Krugman, what I mentioned in that time, he recommended to devaluate currency. Why Latvia didn't do that? There was very simple explanation. Latvia have a too liberal policy for the currencies, and practically all, more than 90% volume of the credits for real estate was on a euro or dollar equivalent. It means there was the credit was based on a hard currency, not on a local currency. And when there was discussion about this devaluation, then idea was to convert all real estate credits to the national currency, but then banks say, but in the same time, we need all deposits in euro should be converted to the national currency too, and etc. And actually, it wasn't happen. There's another explanation why it wasn't happen. Such decision should be obligatory only for Latvian banks. It shouldn't be obligatory for Finnish banks. We have a very large Finnish bank. bank in Latvia, and all people like me, that have money in a Finnish bank, should not take part of the such sort tricks if the state will make such manner. This is a graph shows the currency of the credit. The credit currency. Blue line is Lats, Latvian currency. Red line is euros, and the yellow is dollars. And you see this is why devaluation wasn't happened. On same picture, we see it's very small credit portfolio for companies and for households in local currency. The mostly it was in euro. And the model what was decided for this how to solve out the crisis was anterior devaluation. It means to decrease salaries, decrease prices. And not used traditional or model what was using by Latvia traditionally, or it was in countries that was not in the eurozone. What the effect which was on the Latvian wealth? This is a medium salary for Latvian people. This graph shows. Between 2002 and 2011, if we convert that in not in money, but we convert that in some according power pirktspējas paritātes principle. Purchasing power then and we convert the income to the bread. Then we have such picture. There was no wealth increase between 2002 and 2011 in Latvia. In that case, all increase of the salaries was deducted by price increase in Latvia. The same as electricity, where we have such some. Yeah, the mechanism which was how Latvia solved the problem was this is. Volume of the credits in Latvia lots in commercial banks, and you see it was decreased from the 17 billion lots till 14 billion lots. In same amount was increasing of the Latvian government debt, international government debt. It means the mechanism how crisis was solved was International Monetary Fund credit was used to pay salaries, lets people pay for banks, and these personal debt convert to the state in anterior debt. That is the way how Latvia solved the problem. This is why it's very hard to say it's success story. Such term should be used only for like joke. Some conclusions, the way how Latvia solved the crisis didn't turn off cause of the crisis. And effect of the Latvian way to solve crisis was we lost 2,000 people, which was leave Latvia. Now is expectation 15% of the people have a plan to leave Latvia in next 5 years. And the price what pay Latvia for how we solved the crisis was equal to the people losses of the medium European country in Second World War. And here you can see the age on the sex pyramid in Latvia. And there was very serious decrease of the birth rate, which was in middle of the 90s when we have a very serious crisis. And same is in these 2009 crisis, and it's very similar with the decrease of the birth rate, which was happened in after Second World War and Second World War time. It means we pay extremely high price about how we solve the crisis problem. This is not success story. It is actually very painful way how we take out of the crisis. Thank you for your attention.
Paldies Jurim Paidaram. Mēs te apspriedamies un nolēmām, ka labāk būs, ja mēs diskusiju izvērtīsim pēc tam, kad noklausīsimies abus ziņotājus. Ja jums nav iebildumu, tad es došu vārdu ekonomikas ministra padomniecei Ilonai PLATONOVai. Ekonomikas ministrs Pavļotu kungs bija gatavs piedalīties mūsu apspriedē, bet, diemžēl, šodien ir apspriede Eiropas Savienības ministriem Viļņā, un viņš tur piedalās. Tādēļ padomniece ir pilnvarota, un kā man ministrs apsolīja, viņi var atbildēt uz visiem jautājumiem.
Absolutely, but I would love to speak in English so that we have a better communication between all of us. So I would highly agree with Mr. Paider's thesis, which he actually was mentioning, and I will even more stress out that in 2006, when the government was seeing that a number of companies were becoming bankrupt because their productivity couldn't meet the overall requirements for labor force. They said, okay, that's fine. There will be other manufacturing companies coming over. And the other thing which government at that point was not doing was we had no taxes on real estate deals and no taxes on profit from deposits. So we can imagine that that was a paradise for speculations. And so I fully agree that some of what was told in the previous presentation is part of why we had really problems, and therefore I will mention 3 areas in which we are currently doing structural changes and why I do believe that there is a hope in Latvia, not just very much pessimism. So I will cover the real sector, government finances, and labor market, which was mentioned as one of the most painful areas. So for real sector, it was so that by 2007, it was really led by local consumption. And what happened was really that so many people went into construction, real estate, in retail, and there was a decreasing share of manufacturing in Latvia. Here you see a graph of how Baltic states and Poland developed over the years. So the red line is Poland. Their growth starting from year 2000 has been without the crisis. But as you see their achievements, if we consider year 2000 as 100%, we had huge bubble, all of our countries. And this bubble was caused by too high expectations on the level of economics. And the main thing which happened was our manufacturing and our business was not able to meet those expectations. So here we see a dynamics of Latvian economics, up, 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 down, and now it's up. It's one of the fastest growing economies right now. And here we compare it to the EU average. We are going forward very fast. Still, you saw what the decline was. So we still are the ones who are growing very, very fast, and the question is why we have such a major difference. You see the investors' confidence and the consumers' confidence, which is higher than it's in Spain and in Greece. You could refer that the Greece might be also some psychological issues as well, not just the economical ones. So here you see how demand and exports were correlating. The red line is exports. Latvian exports are 40% higher than they have ever been. This is one of the signs which makes us as a Ministry of Economics to believe that there is something happening in the economics which is favorable. And you see as a domestic demand, which was the previous booster of Latvian economics, is much lower than it was in 2007. I can mention that in year 2006, banks inflowed in Latvian economy the size of money which was equivalent to Latvian state budget. So can you imagine how the prices exploded at that moment, especially people who have lived for many years in a different situation and they wanted to have better housing, have better cars. So everyone was buying new cars, everyone was buying a new real estate because everyone saw that as the way how you can really sort all your problems. But nobody was really investing in the manufacturing. We had 11% of manufacturing in our GDP share, which is extremely low, and currently it's approximately 16% already. So the balance of payments for years was so low, and you saw it already in the previous presentation. However, we see that the productivity of labor force was not growing that fast. Nominal unit of labor cost went up enormously, so a lot of companies were just falling out of market. And currently, as you see, it's going approximately similar, so the costs and the productivity is going in the same direction. Export and import, you saw that already in the previous slides. What happens in economical terms? We have two reasons why our export is growing. One is external demand, which, as we know, Europe is really going through different times. So the gray area is actually decreasing, it's not growing. But the competitiveness, which means price versus the quality, is increasing with the year-over-year. And so we are now in a situation where we have no longer possibility to rely on domestic demand, nor actually on cheap labor. And Mr. Paiders very well noted that the rail lines are open, so people are not ready to work for unacceptably low salaries. Those who are, they are still staying, but there are many who are not ready really to work. And I will show you in the next presentation, where there will be discussion about labor market, what's happening with the salaries. So we see that high-tech sector is growing the fastest. If you compare Latvia and Scandinavian countries, on the table you see Latvia 55% of low-tech sector. We still have too many companies which operate in a very small value-added chain. And this is only about the manufacturing. And this also happens with a lot of threats to Latvian economy. And a very small part of them is only high-tech sector. Anyway, the government finances was another area besides real factor which were affected within this crisis. So we see how the budget deficit was tremendously cut, and we moving towards euro, we are reducing the state deficit. So 2009 it was 10%, even with all the budget cuts and the tax increase, which also followed actually 2008, 2009. But at the same time, the fiscal consolidation happened not only on the expenditures and revenues, but it also happened with the smart using of EU structural funds. This is something which you will not see here, but I can tell you that we have not lost any EU money because we wouldn't have local co-financing. So all local co-financing which was necessary was found in state budget despite the whole crisis. So whenever we cut anything, we cut enormously on government wages. So we have lost some of the talent in the state. That's very important. But we have also reduced the number of agencies from 148 to 97. There are some benefits from that. There are some drawbacks. We see them right now, that there are some insufficient controls in energy sector, but there are many other areas where economic development is benefiting from the fact that we have less controls. So we have now a very acceptable Maastricht criteria budget deficit, and you see a lot of other countries have a situation much worse than ours. I don't want to explain you too much about different rankings. Rankings are increasing, which is of course nice, but then we go to different kind of explanations why labor market and what happened with it. So here we see the increase of jobs and economics of GDP and occupied jobs and our unemployment. So we see that in 2008 we had a huge, enormous loss of jobs. We lost more than 200,000 jobs in 1 year. So the crisis happened, and what happened was that public sector was cutting on jobs and salaries. But then if you look at the graph on my right, you see that the private sector cut only on jobs. It did not cut on salaries almost at all. So what happened, we increased the productivity of many industries, and I have had discussion, for example, with our machinery and metalworking industry, which is now achieving enormous growth. They said before the crisis they had 25,000 employees. Today their output is about 20% above pre-crisis level, but their employment is about 21,000. 4,000 people are still without jobs. So our employment rate is now more or less with the EU average, but percentage of unemployment rate increase or decrease, let's say so, is one of the best in Europe right now. We are getting every year about 35,000 jobs back, and they are mainly in manufacturing and services which are exportable rather than more oriented to the local consumption. So unemployment is decreasing, of course, because of two reasons. One is the growth of jobs, which is much slower than we would like to, because we cannot get in 1 year back those 200,000 jobs, which were mainly oriented to construction and other local demand generating items. But we can do whatever we can in order to help manufacturing. So youth unemployment, again, another picture, is still slightly high, but we are one of those where youth unemployment rate is dropping the most. So our forecast for the labor market is that we will get more and more active participation of the labor and also lower unemployment rate, which is not just due to people leaving, but also due to creating new jobs. And so what's next? In our national development plan, we have said that we are following the EU 2020 strategy, but our main breakthrough will be through industrial policies. So we do believe that Latvian industrial policy is something that we really should take care of, and therefore we are critically analyzing the tax, education and science, entrepreneurship, innovation, all the other things which can help us to grow more jobs and help more jobs in sustainable export-able industries. So we hope that there will be 40% productivity growth in manufacturing by 2020 compared to 2011. Why we think it's so important? There is one thing, when we look at the salaries in Latvia and the productivity, if we compare Germany and Latvia, then there's 6 times difference in productivity. So is in the salaries, because companies cannot pay more than they are capable of paying. And if we start another experiment, how it happened in 2005 and 6, when the public sector was just pumping up the prices and salaries of people without real coverage in the real sector, then you have another bubble. We have, of course, a lot of challenges, because we have to minimize rent seeking. We have had that for ages in Latvia. We have to avoid picking winners, saying that these companies or these sectors or these segments are going to be the ones which win, because we find out that current economic is developing in a very interesting way. It's between sectors. The growth right now is happening in intersectoral phase. So we have identified market and government failures and minimized risk, or try to minimize the risk, to replace private investment. Mr. Paiders in his previous presentation was showing that the private companies and civil people were borrowing about 18 billion, all in total. And government is maybe able to provide 500 million, and it would be maybe 3–4% of total borrowing necessary in our market for different goods. So we have to be really smart, so we don't lend to those who can borrow from those companies who can borrow from banking sector. And I have had a lot of discussions with successful exporters, and I would consider a successful exporter who exports at least €500,000 per year. And they say, well, I don't have any problems on borrowing money today. I can get it for 2–3% per annum. And it's just a question, I don't want to grow much faster. 10% is a sizable risk. So we have analyzed what are our core competitiveness advantages, and one of them is price. And that is, as I said, a major risk, because if we want to see good salaries, then only being priced and made in EU is not something that can help us in the long run. In short run, fine, yes. So our companies right now are specializing on niche production because we are ready to do smaller tasks which are not interesting to large European internationals. We are ready to produce in flexible volumes, deliver on time. We have a good logistics sector, and we have also knowledge about our labor force, pluses and minuses. Whenever you ask somebody about the educational system in Latvia, they will say, well, it's very poor. But then when you ask them about their staff, they will say that they are very professional, they are very talented, and they are very good deliverers of your products. So there is something in the perception of who we are and what we can do. But it helps us that we are part of the EU. A lot of companies are more trustworthy partners, especially in the third countries. So what are the bottlenecks? One is access to capital markets. There are companies which are good in accessing capital, and then there are a lot of companies which have those problems, especially SMEs, especially startups. For them, we need to identify support mechanisms. We will have shortage of labor force. We have lack of growth strategies. A lot of companies are doing what their customers are asking, but they don't have a plan on how to develop. So innovation and R&D is something that limits the growth of our industries. So is a challenge regulation in export countries. If we talk about Germany, Finland, or even Sweden, whenever you try to enter their markets, well, it's free markets. Still, we don't see that they are so free. You need to certify, over-certify, have another 3 papers and another 5 papers there, and then you need to have capabilities and so on. So it's quite challenging for our exporters, but still they're finding their way. And also we found that it's a lack of industrial zones. We don't have proper development areas where you would have to be able to organize clusters or more industries so they have a scalability. Plus we have energy cost issue, which we have been sorting the last 2 years. And of course, for me, it's very easy to comment on the prior mistakes because my minister only arrived on the post less than 2 years ago, so am I. We have been in the private sector beforehand, so we haven't put our hands in making and causing those mistakes in the past. But what we do right now, we are trying to help our product producers and establish a dialogue with industries, which is sometimes possible, sometimes difficult, and therefore we have developed this national industrial policy where we involve NGOs, we involve other ministries, Ministry of Economics and Ministry of Education and Science, and we try to build up the dialogue. Why I say try to? We meet twice a month, 3 times per month with different groups, but there is still lack of trust in government or in private sector. Not all the people are involved in NGOs or in chambers of trade and commerce. Our chamber only represents maybe 1,000 companies, whereas we have 200,000. So we need to work with a lot of players and say, okay, guys, unite, because I have 5 civil service people who are working on industrial policy. I can't have discussions with 5,000 organizations. That's just impossible. So it takes time. But our priorities are, of course, export promotion. And I can say that we have a lot of quarrels about export promotion. Some say you as a government should say, okay, which countries we go to, and then we all go together. But when you see that Latvia is growing the fastest, why it's happening? And economists say, you know what? Because it's diversified. Our exports right now are very diversified. And it's diversified because we said, we will not lead you. You will say where you want to go, and we will cover you part of the costs from the exhibitions. For example, you can get a 50% reduction if you go to a new market, to a fair, or to a visit. But we will not, as a government, lead you to where you go, because that's your choice where you think it's appropriate to go. In the 2 years, we see that it's a very fruitful strategy because companies choose where they want to go, and we are less on the risk that we will choose the wrong ones. So we have introduced a special tax, and I hope that Parliament will accept it, that will reduce costs on energy resources. In the last years, we have issued so many licenses on renewables, plus cogeneration. And now it all comes as a back burner to our industries and manufacturing. When we look at the access to labor force and skills development, we are co-financing training of companies. But what we also do, we have reached out to our diaspora. we have established a re-immigration plan saying, guys, give us information about what you want, what you know, so that when we have a company which wants to have new employees, they can at least find you. And actually, most of companies which right now grow, 15 to 20% of their employed people are coming from abroad, because they can find their fired people through social networks, through their relatives, because you have some community enacted here. And we also have established some access to finance through mediator bodies. So we have some grants to SMEs, but we also have working on the development of risk capital, which is of course a new trend, which is not usual, which is strange for some. But we'll see that there's a lot of corruption risks when the government takes a decision whom they are going to finance. So it's better to share the responsibility with some private entities which put on their own money and co-finance the public finance. So we are putting together a development of business infrastructure, and also we are having as one of the priorities building the innovation performance. Again, innovation in terms of how to link together our scientists, which are well funded by EU and have no need to talk with the business. When you go to the business, they say, well, I don't need those scientists. When I go to them, they say, I'm not interested. That's not science, what you want from me. Isn't that a challenge? I think it's a major challenge for us, because we invest a lot in the research and development. And then the research and development is something on their own, and there's no link with the businesses. And so we have introduced a small innovation voucher, making, okay, we will give money to the businesses, and then they will go to the scientists, say, I have the money, but then you have to work for what I find it interesting, not just what you found interesting. So here are our challenges: higher value added and productivity, role of manufacturing as the main driver force of Latvian economy. We want to have more modern products and services and sophisticated export structure. And then last but not least, new and highly paid jobs is on agenda for Latvia. We still miss more than 150,000, but that's how we're going forward. Joining Eurozone is not something that's going to solve our problems, but it will slightly reduce the export ability or problems with exporting to other countries, because it's an extra cost for a number of companies when they transfer money. So we hope we will get a lower borrowing available for our companies as well when we are joining Eurozone. Anyway, as we saw in the previous presentation, about 80% of our debt is in euro. And then we need to concentrate on sustainable economic growth. Business environment, we have done already some part within the last 2-3 years. We need to do more. And we need to have structural reforms on education, on public administration and social sector, because cutting public administration salaries and size of the administration is not enough. You also need to change the way they operate, to have them more, to have less cost, less burden on your industries. So this is how we see our economic forecast. It has fallen down and it's going up now, and we hope that it will continue growing. And it's not just because of what government did, it's thanks to businesses who have actually managed to do that. And our export is growing, and we are quite happy about that. And we are very grateful for our businesses which are generating this growth. Now we are open to questions. Thank you.
Liels paldies! Mēs ar interesi noklausījāmies šos abus ziņojumus. Un sevišķi man patīk, ka tas pēdējais grafiks rādīja, cik augstu un tālu mēs iesim. Bet diez vai tas, kas ir uzzīmēts, var notikt dzīvē tā, kā tas notiek uz papīra, jo reāla dzīve, piemēram, man rādās daudz savādāk. Braukājot pa laukiem, pa republiku, daudz cilvēki nāk klāt un sūdzās, ka darbu nevar dabūt. Jā, tie varbūt nav vislabāk sagatavotie cilvēki, tie arī ir varbūt gados vecāki cilvēki. Un tā problēma ir ne tikai Latvijā, tāda problēma ir arī visā Eiropas Savienībā, jo tiek nosaukti skaitļi, tie ir daudz 10 miljonu jauno cilvēku, kas nevar dabūt darbu. Nu, un Eiropas komisija ir nākusi klajā ar priekšlikumu dalīt naudu, lai mazinātu jaunatnes bezdarbu. Liela daļa no tās naudas aizies jaunatnes izglītošanā. Un mans jautājums ir tāds. Vai nebūs tā, ja mums Latvijā, ka mēs grafikus skaistus zīmēsim, bet reālo jaunu darba vietu skaitu nepalielināsim? Un tad tie cilvēki, kas pēc 2, 3 gadiem vai 4 gadiem, atkarībā no tā, kāds būs tas izglītības mērķis katram, iegūšu labu izglītību par Eiropas Savienības naudu tajā skaitā un par mūsu pūlu skaitu, neatradīs šeit darbu. Un iznās, kad mēs par Eiropas naudu gatavosim strādniekus lielajām ekonomikām Eiropas Savienībā. Tas ir mans jautājums. Redzat, man ir vienkāršāk. Es, ko gribu, to arī varu pateikt. Šeit man nav jāprasa priekšsēdētājiem kaut kāda atļauja. To es jokoju, protams. Mums vēl ir līdz starpbrīdim palikušas kādas 30 minūtes, pusstunda. Tādēļ es tagad lūkšu savus kolēģus izteikties, un tad referenti, ja prezentētāji, varēs uz tiem atbildēt, kā jūs vēlēsieties. Vai nu katram atsevišķi, es domāju, tas būs pa dāsni, bet varbūt kādi 3, 4 cilvēki uzstāsīs, un tad jūs varēsiet atbildēt. Bet tas, kā jūs paši labāk gribat. Ja? Uzskatiet, ka es pirmo jautājumu esmu uzdevis, un es redzu Lamsdorfs. Un tas noteikums paliek spēkā. Katrs tomēr stādāties priekšā, jo mūsu prezentētājiem ir ļoti interesanti zināt, no kādas valsts jūs esat. I'm sorry, Lamsdorf. Lūdzu.
I have 2 questions. First question, how many, in percentage, how many Latvian enterprises are able to invest, to make investments? Because it is the signal of economic recovery. And the second question is the accumulation, the development of accumulation of capital in Latvia. Thank you.
I didn't understand the second question. Can you repeat once again, please?
So, the gross capital formation, is it understandable?
Lūdzu, Tobi.
Θα πω κάποια σχόλια, τα οποία μπορείτε βεβαίως να αναλύσετε εσείς, και θα κάνω μια προσπάθεια να πω 2 πράγματα για την εμπειρία μας στην Κύπρο, που σε κάποια σημεία της μπορεί να είναι παρόμοια με τη δική σας. Στην Κύπρο, χωρίς καμία αμφιβολία, μπορεί σε κάποια άλλα κράτη να ήταν διαφορετικό ή ελαφρώς διαφορετικό. Στην Κύπρο, χωρίς καμιά αμφιβολία, η κρίση ισοπαίδωσε την οικονομία και ήρθε επειδή μπήκαμε στο Euro. Τελείως καθαρό. Χωρίς ένταξη στο Euro, η Κύπρος δεν θα έμπαινε σε αυτούς τους κινδύνους, δεν θα έρχονταν στην Κύπρο οι κίνδυνοι της Ελλάδας αν ήμασταν σε διαφορετικό νόμισμα και δεν θα διευκολύνονταν τόσο πολύ οι τραπεζίτες από άλλα κράτη στην εξαγορά κυπριακών τραπεζών και άρα να υπάρξει αυτή η σύνδεση προβλημάτων με άλλες περιοχές. Γενικότερα όμως, δεν είμαι οικονομολόγος, αλλά με όσα υποχρεωθήκαμε όλοι να διαβάσουμε τον τελευταίο καιρό, να μην πω ότι ήταν με κακή πρόθεση, σίγουρα δεν ήταν. η δημιουργία του Euro, κοινού νομίσματος σε διαφορετικά κράτη κλπ. Μπορεί να έγινε από μια τάση έτσι υπέρ του οράματος της Ένωσης της Ευρώπης, ας το δω επίοικος, όμως δεν είχε τα χαρακτηριστικά η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση που επέτρεπαν το κοινό νόμισμα. Για παράδειγμα, στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες, όταν κατέρρευσε η οικονομία μιας πολιτείας, δεν υπήρχαν αυτές οι συζητήσεις που υπάρχουν εδώ, θα στείλω την Τρόικα, θα πάρθουν αποφάσεις συγκεκριμένες και μόνο για αυτήν την περιοχή. Υπήρξε η συμπεριφορά του κεντρικού κράτους προς μέρος του. Εδώ στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση δεν υπήρχαν τα στοιχεία και έτσι η κρίση χτύπησε πολύ περισσότερο μικρότερα κράτη. Και θα πάρει πάρα πολλά χρόνια για να βγουν οι οικονομίες αυτών των κρατών και των πολιτών συνακόλουθα προς τα πάνω. Φοβούμαι ότι η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση έχει γίνει τόσο μεγάλη σαν όγκος που οποιοδήποτε αντικείμενο περάσει από την περιφέρεια της το καθιστά δορυφόρον του. Δηλαδή πάει να γίνει σαν μοίρα, ας πούμε, ότι δεν μπορείς να ξεφύγεις από τον destiny να είσαι μέλος ενός χώρου που δημιουργά δυστυχώς στις περιφέρειες του κυρίως και σε μικρά κράτη αυτά τα πολύ σοβαρά προβλήματα. Και το τελευταίο που θέλω να σχολιάσετε, βεβαίως εσείς εκπροσωπείτε το κράτος σας εδώ, δεν είμαι σίγουρος ότι μπορείτε να μπείτε σε αυτή τη συζήτηση, αλλά είναι σωστό να εκχωρείται η οικονομική πολιτική ενός κράτους σε έναν άλλον κέντρο εξουσιών. Γίνεται ο πρόεδρος της Δημοκρατίας ενός κράτους να μην μπορεί να ασκήσει οικονομική πολιτική. Αυτός που εξελέγει δεν μπορεί. Ασκεί οικονομική πολιτική ο διοικητής της Κεντρικής Τράπεζας εκάστου κράτους, ιδιαίτερα σε κράτη που είναι σε μνημόνιο, και αφαιρείται τελείως αυτή η εξουσία από αυτόν που έχει εκλεγεί δημοκρατικά. Αυτά σαν πρώτη δόση για σκέψεις. Ευχαριστώ.
Paldies. Es domāju, lai jautājumi neaizmirstos. Varbūt tagad ļausim atbildēt uz tiem jautājumiem.
Okay, then I start with the youth unemployment. As you see, we have the fastest decrease of youth unemployment, or one of the fastest youth unemployment. But there are two major issues which we, at least in Latvia, see. I haven't analyzed the situation in other EU countries. About 40% of our unemployed youth are secondary education graduates which were not planning to go to high school, so university. They have stayed in secondary education and not went to professional education just because there are wrong incentives in educational system. So instead of choosing a profession, they stay in the same area in the local municipality where they are brought up, because money follows each of those youth. And as we have in this graph, you saw we have a lack of actually young people. We had the low growth and low birth rates. Then we have a wrong motivation for the secondary education to keep those young people. So 40% of those, and they are the most likely people who will then afterwards leave Latvia because they can't find sufficient job. Because economists right now see that there's plenty of jobs available in Latvia, but they require certain education. For example, IT. They require thousands of employees. We can have jobs created for thousands and thousands of programmers, but we don't have them. And those young people who are studying in the university or even in the secondary education, they don't choose the right skills. So that's one thing. And then the question about will be there sufficient jobs for all those young people. it is a question of what are they going to study. And that's why we have done already within the last 2 years, we have tried to develop specialization so that students already at the 6th, 7th grade, as it happens, for example, in Germany, already specializes. So they choose something which they are good at, so they can find a job after they have graduated their educational level. It's very important, because if the people will just study general studies and we will invest more in those general studies and there are not sufficient jobs, then we cannot expect that they will stay in Latvia, because the salary for unprofessionals or is very different in the other EU countries. But the backbone of economics is manufacturing, and that we strongly believe. Have you any comments on this? Then you had a second very good question about how capable companies are, or how able companies are invest in their capital formation. And actually, there are two parts of this. One is how able, and then the second question is how willing. And the problem is that we right now see that even companies which are able to invest are reducing their investments in capital. And that is a major problem right now in Latvia. So we are discussing, because we see that in 2009, 2010, there were still more investments, and even 11, it was more investments going in, and 12 and 13, we have a reduction in investments actually in capital formation. So that of course is one of the indicators which provides certain threat to our further development, because a lot of our manufacturing capacities are reaching their level of productivity, or let's say their ability for, because when they were producing at 50% load, we could speed up very fast. Now when they're already about 70, 80, it's difficult. No. Those are all mainly already in the Liepājas metallurgs and in burned down. I mean, we had one of the problems in our structural overgoing from Soviet times was that a lot of entrepreneurs chose short-term benefits over long time, and a lot of equipment was actually put into the scrap, in the metal scrap. A lot of equipment bought in Soviet times was long time ago. I would say it was before 2000 year, or even going to the scrap, because people didn't know how to sell. So most of our success stories, companies, are the ones which stayed in the market and which were mainly actually managed by engineers. Maybe Mr. Paiders can comment on this.
First of all, I'm not so optimistic, and actually, but I have my background. I have a 10 years Latvian director of a transnational company, and actually, if you ask me about the Latvia, and just forget I'm working in university, but if just I come to the company and just look to the figures, it doesn't matter, especially if you see a Latvian IT. Then we see the figures and we see what's going on, and I say this is overinvestment. You overinvest. You don't need any investment more. This is overinvest, because in last 4 years, Latvia lost 200,000 people in working age, 200,000, and all businesses every week they lost some customers. Every week, every month, every year. This is just like the decline line. And of course, in some cases, there is no need for new investment. It's over-investment, because you don't need so high investment, because your customers' number is less and became less and less next 5 years. It means I'm not so optimistic. And actually, when we see the graphs on export and import, in this morning I have another discussion. I see the graphs for a coffee and cacao and the tea. Latvia is very huge exporter of cacao beans. Latvia is very huge exporter of the tea. We don't produce, we have a good exporter of the coffee, actually, because these, if you remember the graph that was shown, export and import is very synchronized. And in same case, what we import, we repacking it on export. Latvia is place when we repacking medicine for a Belarus, for a Russian market, for etc., and it comes as import in same time, in second hand, it has export. And then these graphs shows very synchronized growing in same time. Import, same time, export, because it's repacking, it's re-export actually. It should be nice to see the real figures, or not re-export. If we deduct of these figures re-export, then we will see real figures going on. And actually, I'm not so optimistic. In Latvia is very, Latvia have a, we're talking about investment. Latvia have a extremely destroy conditions of the energy, especially in electricity. Latvia built corrupt system for renewable energy, where renewable energy producers have a double price as in Germany. Double price as in Germany, or 4 times higher price as it is in market price. And how now this energetical sector, where partly is my colleague from the Minister of Economy, how they now save these from the open European market. The price to transfer 1 kilowatt energy from between Latvian and Lithuanian border is higher than price to get 1 kilowatt in market. It means the price to transfer just for between Latvian and Lithuanian border is higher as price for the electricity, same volume of the electricity. And of course, how you like invest in such conditions? Now it's big discussion of the big Latvian cement plant. And they now discussing, because they cannot buy electricity from this system. They will produce own electricity station because it's cheaper than to buy from the Latvian hydroelectric power stations. And the question is, what about the investment? It's, of course, if you look at the graphs and projections, it's very nice. Real picture is much pessimistic. This year, Latvian steel producer is locked down, but the GDP is growing. This summer, Latvian Alder is the big beer factory. We stop production in Latvia, but GDP will be growing, and the figures expectation is growing and growing. It's let's say I ask be more realistic. But of course, next year is elections year for Latvia, and we will listen this year from the parties from government only optimistic figure about the job what they done in this time. Sorry.
Then I had a last comment about risks on entering EU and Eurozone. I would refer trying to link Euro with crisis is the same as trying in Latvia link our crisis with the Parex. It's we had a similar or semi-similar crisis in Latvia even without joining Euro. So it's not about having Euro or not having Euro as a being part of the reasons why the crisis is happening. So at the same time, if we look at Latvian politics, over the last 20 years, we have never executed or never used the fiscal policy as the one which could actually boost economic development. So having it somewhere else will not change probably our situation, because we have really never acted on something that active fiscal policy. So at the same time, I would like to refer to United States, not the very perfect example, but still they have very different states with very different economic situations. And having one united currency does not really inflict on their total growth. Their share in global GDP is still in a better shape than the Europe's.
Paldies, redziet, cik interesanti sarunas var notikt. Tas ir labi. Miloslav, lūdzu.
Very shortly. In your picture, Latvia is an export-driven economy. And so my question is very simple. So this export expansion is based on market opportunities or on the weakness of domestic market. In my case, in the case of Czech economy, so we have even the biggest share of export on GDP than Germany. We are going up to 80%. And so it is the consequence, it is the the consequence of the weakness of our domestic market. And my question is the situation in Latvia. So it is also the consequence of the weakness of domestic market or very favorable market opportunities abroad? And the second question is connected with the first. So what is the share of exports in your GDP? For example, in the case of China, the share of export on the GDP is 66%. So my question is the figure of Latvia in this case.
Man tagad ir saraksts, es skatījos uz kreiso pusi, bet labā arī ir. Helmut, lūdzu.
Yeah, I also want to thank for the very interesting briefings of both speakers. And I would pick up the debate where Takis has interfered into the debate. And that is, of course, correlated to the issues you mentioned. The focus, or one focus of the in the second speech was national industrial policy as the core of the whole problem and developing it. But if we are discussing the problems and overcoming how to come out of the crisis, etc., on the example of Latvia, but what is true also for a lot of other countries, then I think we are wrong if the focus would be the national industrial policy, the national market, but we are speaking in the European Union from the common market. So the integrated, the single market. That means we have as a challenge, what does mean the single market for our national economic policies? With a common currency. I'm coming from Germany, so I know that I'm a member of the Eurozone country, and several others are not from the Eurozone countries, but they are of course also affected by the Eurozone country, the Eurozone, and their impact on the national economic policies. And I would say the outcome can only be if we are overcoming to concentrate to find a national strategy for dealing with a European-wide or international financial market and financial policies. So in this way, I think we have to think, what does it mean, a national strategy for a common European industrial policy? So if we don't speak and think about what does it mean in European-wide industrial policy for job growth, job places, growth, innovation, etc., etc., what does it mean in challenges for education, for strategies in the social welfare system, because then, of course, the outcome must be also to think over what are common European standards for social policy, for the payments, for the employees, etc. So in this way, I would like, do you have in Latvia a debate on that issue on the eve of joining the Eurozone? And secondly, that is also a question on the competition. You said you want to have an export-oriented industry. But if all countries have an export-driven economy, so what is the competition? What are the factors in which we can organize a harmonious common outcome with each other in our single market?
Paldies. Miloslav, jūs nedzirdat tūki, bet es iejaukšos un norunāsim tā, ka tagad ļausim atbildēt uz tiem jautājumiem, kas te ir. Pēc tam mums būs kafijas pauze, un pēc kafijas pauzes turpināsim atkal. Lūdzu.
The reason why export is growing so fast is, of course, weak performance of internal. I was mentioning the demand is very low, but I don't know how in Czech Republic, but in Latvia we hope that picking up of the local demand will not stop export growing companies from doing what they're doing right now. Because as I told you, output is by 40% up. So it's not something that we would see as something that would happen because of local markets. And the share of export in GDP, approximately, export is 5 billion lats and the GDP is 16. So you can approximately come about 1/3. No, it's about 1/3. 5 billion versus 16. So it's less than 1/3. We don't have that high share of export still in our GDP.
Roughly spoken, 60%?
30. 30. Less than 30, I would say. And then about the common market, I could mention that I had in my presentation already mentioning the common market or the EU agenda, EU 2020. When we established our industrial policy, we also analyzed the European Commission's set agenda. We strongly believe that we become as a part to German supply chains, for example. We analyzed our industries and we see that they are part of German supply chain. But if I talk about national industrial policy, it's because I'm a local politician. Guys, I have to be realistic. I at least have to sell it to our local people. But we are part of the common area. So when Swedes are doing well in China, we are doing well as well because we are part of their supply chain. When Germans are doing well in Africa, it's again, we are part of the supply chain very often. Most of our exports go to, 60% of our exports are EU zone, but we are also diversifying. And so we are going to CIS and Russia, we are going to the Far East. So it helps us a lot. But about the specialization, of course it's necessary, there are historical specializations, but I'm very happy that European community right now is facilitating the, how do we call it, this research and innovation agenda with the sector, with the specialization by countries or by Baltics. When we had comments from the World Bank, their first discussion was, guys, why don't you concentrate on Baltic industrial policy? Why there's a national? And there is a point in that as well, that we have to look at the Baltic industrial policy. But cluster development very often happens within 100 kilometers, within 1 hour drive. So we have to look at this as well, that we have to facilitate the development of manufacturing or production or networking or development also inside the national territory, which is in other countries still already in a much better shape. So we still need to work on national level where companies, B2B, really this relationship formation, trust in supply chains. We had a lot of problems in 2006-07 when companies got orders, they couldn't fulfill, they hired some other company and it failed. So now we have to to work on this once again, to building up the trust between partners so we can cooperate, become bigger, become stronger, become more specialized. But anyway, our strengths already now is niche segments, so we can show where we have manufacturing capabilities, and it will be very much depending on how the other European countries are developing, for sure.
First of all, of course, now if you see the different countries, every country like to export, now they like to import. And it's very similar in reaction on a big depression. And actually, this policy, when a lot of countries decide to promote export and avoid import, was why this big depression was much deeper as it should be. And actually, if Latvia built up so ambitious plan for export, and the same Lithuania built the same plan, and actually, finally, that shouldn't be so optimistic as it. But of course, when I say the critics, there is a real export. There still is real export. There still is Latvia is very strong in some positions like food, like timber, like Riga is one of the main Belarusian export seaport. We have a lot of service export. In that case, it's not only some packing and our export things, but to say the answer about these common policies and this Latvian industrial policy. Actually, in Latvia, it's a bit joke about that when everything is privatized and after privatization destroyed, the government start invest in industry and to invest and build state property again. But actually, this I'm very cautious and very skeptical about the person what ruling a country in such manner in 2007, 2008. Now, what are calling success so big disaster in the losses of the people, and now they start looking for some investment and where to invest. And I'm very skeptical about success of such story because now we make a huge investment. Latvia bail out actually. There is a big losses of state money in a biggest steel company. What is the face of the bankruptcy? I think it should be same in the biggest Latvian Air Baltic, and there was same Latvians by the stake, and there was a not very wealthy situation, etc. It means I'm not very optimistic. And actually, these things it doesn't matter. Latvia enjoy Eurozone or not enjoy Eurozone. It not makes sense for a lot of cases. This because since a long time Latvian national currency is strongly connected with the euro, and we plus minus 1%, and then actually in some export and import we have the same conditions as all Eurozone countries.
Paldies. Nu, mēs esam nopelnījuši kafijas pauzi uz 15 minūtēm. Lūdzu pēc tam organizēt, visiem atgriezties, jo cilvēki steidzās viens otrs uz darbu atpakaļ. Paldies.